So, we're getting into our main speaker. This is one of my favorite quotes by Louis Gohmert. And he said that it's in God's hands does not mean we can lean on our shovels and wait for the hole to dig itself. It's not going to happen. So, Craig Huey, Carol and I saw him up in Fresno in August at a conference by the Tea Party California Caucus. And we both looked at each other and said, "Ooh, let's get him for our meeting." And very fortunately, he was able to do that. He is the author of the Huey Report on politics and where am I looking for it? Hang on. There we go, right piece of paper. He is the author also of the Reality Alert, which is more focused on a Christian and religious perspective on politics. You can sign up for both of those newsletters. He also does a judge's guide, which we've cited in our voter guide. He rates all the judges, so otherwise you wouldn't know who to vote for, so there's a great resource. And he also has a book out, and you see it over here. It's about the deep state, 15 surprising dangers that you should know. So I would encourage you to go over and support his work and get a copy of his book after he has spoken. And with that, let's get Craig Huey up there, and he's going to tell us how we can save California and the role of Christians in doing so. Craig.
Thank you, Greg. Well, good evening. Great to see all of you, and we've got a lot of material to cover. I'm going to go through it really, really fast, but I do have a couple of questions. Number one, how many of you believe we could actually turn California around? You guys are brave souls, because so many people think it's an impossibility. Well, I'm going to show you a way that it is a possibility. Right here, thank you, in this area, we'll be able to even take marginal districts or very heavy Democratic districts and flip them. I'll show you how to do that. Now, let me also ask, how many of you get my newsletter Reality Alert? Okay, how many of you get Huey Report? All right, so a few of you do. I'm glad you do. I hope most of you will sign up for it. And what we want to do is I want to kind of give you a survey of what's wrong, and a survey that shows a path to victory, to making California great again. We want to be able to reclaim the California dream. How many of you know somebody who has left California? Whoa! How many of you have thought about leaving California? Well, I can tell you all the reasons why to leave California. 30 to 40% higher expense, income tax, regulations, highest poverty rate, all kinds of problems. My wife and I are committed to staying in California and reclaiming the California dream. You see, I was born in California, and I've seen the changes. And I want to see California be able to be the golden state it once was. We have a war on families here in California. And a lot of people, when they think about it, they say, yeah, that's right. We get F's and we get D's on so many different things. We just heard about the issues of release and problems with prisoners, protection of the unborn, roads. We get an F by every agency that rates the states on roads. Water. I'm doing a marketing campaign right now for a water company, and I'm just so sick at how bad California water is from that tap water. It's unbelievable. And retirement, the high expenses. I was just talking to somebody, we have a second house up in Lake Arrowhead. I was talking to somebody this weekend. She's going to Las Vegas. I've seen people going to Tennessee, to Texas, all over the place, just to be able to live in retirement. And safety. Those who get my newsletter know about my son Corey. Back in March, my son Corey, who's 29 years old, was down Pacific Coast Highway and Western Avenue in Torrance area, Palos Verdes area, at a chicken wings. 3 gang members came up to him, tried to rob him, and shot him 5 times, actually 6, 1 grace. 2 arteries were shattered. He flatlined. And I got to tell you, it's a miracle he's alive. This happened so that about Easter Sunday, he actually was out of the hospital. Doctors can't explain it. Nobody can explain it, how those bullets just were able to avoid damage. Now, he still has 3 bullets in him. He can't move his right arm. Out of the people that shot him, they were juveniles. They were known gang members. And what's ironic, I was on Fox talking about the spike in crime in California, whether you're low income, mid income, or upper income. And just 2 days later, my son's shot. The 2 kids with the shooter, gang members, spent 10 days in jail and were released because they could not prove intent. The shooter is trying to be tried as a juvenile. They all go to high school. The detectives are so mad because the 2 other ones are back in high school, say they're going to hurt their high school friends or others soon. And you see, in California, our justice system is so broken. If you're a juvenile, you can't even touch them. And it's out of control. Transportation, starting a business. If I tried to start a business like I did when I was out of college, I wouldn't have been able to make it successful. Education, all these things are badly graded. We're the 4th highest individual income tax. We have the highest gasoline tax. We have the 2nd highest capital gains tax. Worst business startups. You know, when we talk about this, California, or Chief Executive Magazine says we're the 51st worst state to do business in. Now, why 51? Because they count Washington, D.C. And then companies are leaving. In my area, where my business is in Torrance, 5,000 people disappeared 2 years ago to Texas. Companies are leaving. We've had 1.5 million jobs lost in the last 7 years. We've got these bloated salaries, $300,000 for these universities. Professors, this doesn't even count their pensions, their perks, and what have you. You take a look at these bloated government salaries are all over the place, and this is part of the university problem. Notice this. These are just some of the same divisions that might have 10 to 100 people making over $100,000 each in the universities dealing with diversity, lesbian, gay rights, this type of thing, all basically doing the same thing. This is some more of the same thing that they're doing right at the universities. And then our budget, unbelievable spike in budget, and yet we're going to have a deficit this year. And we have the progressives, the socialists, doing more and more incredible attacks on the family, on the church, and that's what we want to take a look at. You know, basically, what we have is a state that is going downhill. And unless we stop it, I don't know what's going to happen in 2020. We got to stop it in 2018. So let's take a look at some of this, because kids leave, middle class exodus, the wealthy flee, retirees give up, entrepreneurs leave, businesses leave, and our quality of life goes down. Our expenses go up, and we have less freedom, less choice. So we've got to drain the Sacramento swamp. Do you know that our legislature is number 1 in pay and number 1 in corruption? There's more assemblymen and state senators in jail or going to jail than in any state in the nation. But look at this. Here's our challenge. Notice what happened with Republicans and independents and Democrats. Republicans keep going down. Democrats right now are finding 3 to 4 to 5%, depending upon the district, increase in registration because there being an army to register people to vote. Notice the amount of difference between the Trump voters and the Clinton voters. how in California can we turn this around? Well, basically doing what we've done in the past is not going to work. Especially today with this organized resistance that we see going on. It's incredible. Now, I have a sign-in sheet to get my newsletter, to get a few things I'm going to mention in this, if we could get this passed out. And basically one of the things I'm going to send to each of you, and you can download it if you want, is a booklet called Indivisible. This is what the Obama team put together after Hillary lost, and is the guidebook. It's the Bible for the Resist organization, for the Resist movement. All the different organizations follow these. What you see on TV, what you hear them say, what they teach people to do, it's all here. And I'll be sending you a copy of that so you can see what they're doing so you can do it better. And what basically they do is they collect money, they collect data, they do digital targeted marketing, they have a get out the vote, GOTV, they combine all that, and they have victory. And that's what they plan to do here in California. And that's what they're working on doing in California. And how do I know all this? Well, one thing is, I'm in marketing and advertising. That's my agency. I have an international advertising agency in Torrance. Clients all over the world. And I ran for Congress in 2011 in a special election in a district where I was supposed to lose by 35,000 votes. Some people persuaded me to go and run in this special election. And I ran. I know. Did anybody help me out in that campaign in 2011? Thank you so much. So I ran for this office. It was the craziest thing in the world because I knew policy, I didn't know politics. And what happened is I beat Deborah Bowen, the Secretary of State. I beat the mayor of Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach, all these other candidates. Nobody knew who I was. I came out of nowhere. What did I do? I combined my marketing talents with a church vote, with Christians in the area. Low propensity voters, nobody expected to get out to vote, and we got them out to vote. Then when the election came along, something weird happened. I'm walking along, and I go to a restaurant. You know what happens at the restaurant? They say, Craig, I got a 20-minute call talking about your stand on this issue. And I go to a store, I got a 15-minute call. And all over the place, I was getting these people. What had happened is they had profiled every voter, Republican and Democrat. They had defined who were the persuadables and who were the dedicated. And they made a division. And what they did is they basically put in 1,500 summer organizers and made 410,000 live calls in the last 20 days of the election. In the most advanced marketing campaign ever. And this was Obama's test campaign for his 2012 election. I was the guinea pig. And I was wiped out where I lost by 2,000 votes. Almost made it. Shocked everybody. But what I learned from that was their strategy and their tactics. I sat back and looked, wow, why didn't I do that? And what we do as conservatives, as libertarians, we market and we try to promote things as if it was 10, 15 years ago. And they do it like it's today. And so we've got to do it like it's tomorrow. So let me show you a couple of things. This is what OFA, that's just one of the organizations that's organizing for action. This is Obama's group. The stakes this year are high. And he's organizing people all over every congressional district in the resist movements and homes all across. And they're doing the data collecting. And they're doing the registration. And we're up against this. This is just one of the many emails they target to the people on their database. Democrat Carly Ruda. And they send this out, and they get the people to volunteer. And it's an aggressive campaign, and the top liberal progressive groups in America have all combined to be able to do this registration, this organization, And on the last weekend, a massive campaign to get people out to vote at the last moment. This is what we're up against. And we're up against the big money. You know, Tom Steyer, he is going to run for something in 2020. And he would like to run for president. How many have seen his commercials? His commercials are to what? Impeach Trump. If you notice, he has a URL where he drives people to sign that petition. What is he doing? He's getting their names and their addresses and their phone numbers. He's building the biggest database ever. And what he's doing is he's putting in right now 150 million of his own money, targeting largely California, with paid and volunteer door knockers, direct mail, phone calls, texts, and he's using that formula, money and data collecting, digital target marketing, and getting out the vote. We've got to be able to do that better. And we have one thing that the progressive left does not have. We have, and this goes beyond truth. This goes beyond, having our feet set in reality. What we have is the power of the Christian vote that is underutilized. So I'm going to take a look at this. And the starting point is to recognize what happened in the impossible election of Donald Trump in 2016. Basically, this was an absolute miracle. Because the man at the beginning had no ground game, little staff, he had all these never-Trumpers. And yet he concentrated on the states he needed to concentrate on. He had the most advanced digital campaign and data collection campaign that he outdid Hillary Clinton. She got the old people from the Obama campaign, and they were using the old data. He had a genius who understood how to do digital marketing and how to do direct mail out of Texas, who's now his campaign manager for 2020. And it was all fresh. And what he did was absolutely amazing. But here's the reality of it. Hillary had $1.4 billion. He had $957 million. Now, I've heard people say, you don't have to have any money to win an election. Not true. But look at it. He should have theoretically been wiped out. What happened was he had this evangelical vote. Now, when we talk about the evangelical vote, let me tell you, nobody saw it, nobody expected it, and I'm going to tell you something that most people don't even know about. Let me ask, I'm not going to ask you this question and have you raise your hands because everybody has changed in the last 6 months. If we were to hear 6 months ago or 7 months ago, and I said, how many of you thought that Trump was going to win the election? Hardly anybody. Like 2 people out of this room would raise their hand. Well, I've noticed now if I say that, everybody raises their hand. But you know what? Hillary didn't think he was going to win. The Democrats didn't think he was going to win. The Republicans didn't think he was going to win. The polls said he wasn't going to win. All the experts and commentators said he wasn't going to win. And Trump didn't think he was going to win. And then came Election Day. What happened to bring out all these people that the polls never found? What happened to bring out all these low propensity voters that were off the radar? Well, everybody stand up, please. I want to give an illustration. If you physically can stand up, please stand up. Now look around. Pretend this is the evangelical church in the United States. Baptists, Assemblies of God, Foursquare, Independent, churches that talk about being born again and about normally called evangelical churches. This represents the U.S. You could say that this represents Redlands, or San Bernardino County if you want. So I'd like you to sit down, you guys to sit down. I would like to have you guys to sit down. You guys sit down. We'll have this table sit down. Now look around. Those who sat down are the evangelical born-again Christians in the United States, here in Redlands, here in this whole San Bernardino area, who are not registered to vote. And any church you go into the Baptist church, you go into the Calvary Chapel, that many people are not registered to vote. Now, I like this table to sit down, and that table to sit down. I like this table to sit down. And we'll have one more table sit down. You sit down, and this table sits down. All right. Those are the evangelical Christians at the church down the street. I just passed the church. If that is the evangelical church. Those are the evangelical Christians, born-again Christians who are registered to vote, who did not vote in 2016. See those who are standing? Those are the evangelical Christians who are registered to vote and voted. Give them a hand. So you may not know this, but in the United States, there's 80 million people who have said they have accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Savior. 35 to 46% in any church in the U.S. are not registered to vote. 45 to 55% who are registered are not voting. Here in so 52% did not vote. 48% did vote. Less than 50% voted. Now look at what would happen if we got 5 or 10% of those evangelical Christians registered to vote. And then we got them out to the poll. And then we got 5 or 10% of those who are registered to vote but didn't vote and got them to the poll. You would change the city council, the school board, the county seat, your congressman, your assemblyman. You would change the state of California. That is the power of this evangelical vote. 7.2 million evangelical Christians in California did not vote. 6.7 million did vote. California has 14 million born-again Christians. Now, what Trump and the Christians with George Barna and David Lane and a number of groups did is they concentrated on the key swing states, like Florida. These states would not have gone for Trump if it was not for them bringing out not just the evangelicals that always vote. They brought out the evangelicals who never vote. And they did it by organizing and targeting and then doing a GOTV to get them to the polls. And so here we see 3 different of these states, just as an example. 7.6% increase in response, 5.8, 6.4, to bring in more people than they had done before, giving the difference to Trump over Hillary Clinton. That's why Trump calls it the evangelical miracle. That's why he is, so excited about it. Last week he invited all the evangelical leaders to the White House and then had them share and preach and pray. And this is key. So the 16 campaign proved that you don't have to match dollars or outspend your opponent. We don't have to have more money. It doesn't mean we have to rely upon TV. I do TV commercials for my clients sometimes, but I got to tell you, it's about the weakest part of a campaign. It doesn't have to compromise or water down positions to the middle. And that he proved evangelicals will vote. To win an election, you need integrated marketing that works, digital ads with ground game, critical, principle and conviction with political positioning, and reach the evangelicals. So, why are the evangelicals something that we can reach? Because evangelicals understand that we're in a cultural war and the Christians are losing. There's a war on Christianity today. And all over the governments. Trump has had to do one thing after another, that FEMA was not giving any money to churches and Christian organizations because it was violating the separation of church and state. He had to do an executive order to demand the deep state of FEMA to do it. And then, do you know that he had to make an executive order to say to the deep state of the National Park Service, who said, you can't have a baptism in a public national park. So all this. I mentioned to Greg when we spoke up in Fresno, I was invited to this meeting just before, around April of the election, for all the evangelical leaders in New York. And at first it was going to be 25 people. Then it became 50, 100, 200, 400 people. Then it became 600 people. These were James Dobson, Franklin Graham, Greg Laurie. These were all the evangelical megachurch teachers, all the Christian radio personalities. I was sitting next to Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible answer man. 1/3 of them didn't like Trump. 1/3 of them didn't know. And 1/3 of them liked Trump. And Trump comes out and he goes, the first thing I'm going to do as your president is I'm going to abolish the Johnson Amendment. Well, you may not know what the Johnson Amendment is, but these pastors did. And they were like, they almost fell off their seat. And there was a second of silence. And then they all jumped to their seats, out of their seats, and started to applaud. You see, in 1954, Lyndon Baines Johnson, as a senator, did not like the Christian conservatives attacking him in Texas. And he snuck through a bill that said if a pastor speaks from the pulpit about political and cultural issues, they could lose their tax exemption. And since 1954, the church has been in fear. And he's the first one who ever said, I will abolish it. No other candidate or president has ever said that. And he has basically destroyed the Johnson Amendment. And he still has not got it passed, but he's destroyed it. He then said, I will stop Planned Parenthood from getting taxpayers' money. Everybody stood up and clapped. Then he said, I will protect Israel and make Jerusalem the capital of Israel. And everybody stood up and applauded. And he looked at them and he said, I will protect your religious liberty. And they all stood up and they applauded. And he said, finally, I will have America saying, Merry Christmas again. He turned those evangelicals to his side. And in my newsletter, Reality Alert, I concentrate on violations of Christian liberty all over the United States and the world. And he addresses those. He has been a hero to those who are watching how he's protected Christians. And so it's a mighty story to be able to tell. And so we have this war here in California against people of faith. And the politicians think we're anemic, that we won't do anything. We've got incredible attacks that have been going on. Like, if you're homeschooled, as a Christian families increasingly are homeschooling, you can't send your kid to a California university, public university, because they won't accept them. Do you know that if you try to have it at a University of California campus, a Christian Bible study, you probably won't be allowed to do so? Because you have to be able to open it up to anybody, even non-believers. Calvary chapels and other churches are under attack, being able to build and expand. And of course, we just had this ban the Bible bill, 2943. We gathered over 15,000 signatures. We did a mighty huge campaign to the Democrats to scare them. We had thousands of people calling. And a miracle happened on that, in that the bill was not voted on and died in the assembly. But it was because the Christians finally did something that politicians didn't know what to do when they got 1,000 phone calls and emails. Because Christians don't do that. You see, the church is starting to wake up. I don't know if you could play this video. If not, I'll just tell them what it says. We're going to try to play this video and see if you can see. This is what one of the assemblymen said about this bill. And you can see why Christians have had enough. And they need to be mobilized. You think we can play it? Okay. No. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to send it to you, and basically what it is this. The assemblyman goes, Christians will have to learn to compromise their core beliefs in order to be able to live in our society. No. That's what he said publicly. Now, you can be Jewish, you can be an atheist, you can be an agnostic, you can be anything you want to be, but to try to force somebody to do something that violates their conscience is anti-American. And that's what the Sacramento politicians are trying to do. So, my wife and I, about 5 weeks ago, we got this invitation. We were like, I think it's like 350 people from all over the world came. These are government leaders and nonprofit leaders. And about 20 of us were Americans. And Sam Brownback and Mike Pompeo are born-again Christians. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, agreed to have Sam Brownback, our amazing ambassador of religious liberty, put together this event to protect the persecuted church. You see, Christians understand that Christians, millions of Christians, are being killed and persecuted, and the government has done nothing about it. Well, for the first time, the U.S. government, with a Turkey pastor, American pastor in jail in Turkey, who did nothing wrong, who simply loved the people there in Turkey. He's rotting in jail. And they're demanding no military aid, no financial aid. In fact, putting in economic warfare against Turkey until they release that pastor. And this is I'm calling it the Pence doctrine of saying, if you persecute religious minorities, you're going to face the wrath of the United States. And at this meeting, we could not believe what Pence and these people were saying. And that's a Sudan pastor. That's in my newsletter, I write about the persecuted church. This is the one in Nineveh area, the Archbishop of Nineveh, who has been wiped out. The whole people have been wiped out. I've been writing about him as he's pleaded for help. He says, we plead for help and nobody listens, by ISIS. So the U.S. now is mobilizing something that the people of faith need to know about. So how does that apply to 2018? We need to market like it's 2018. We need to get the money and the data collection and target the digital marketing and combine it with the GeoTV. And we need to mobilize the evangelicals. We need to activate them. So who are these evangelicals? Just real quickly. What is a born-again or evangelical Christian? Born-again Christians are defined as people who say they have made a personal commitment to Jesus Christ that is still important in their life today, and who also indicate they believe that when they die, they will go to heaven because they had confessed their sins and had accepted Jesus Christ as their Savior. And then what is an evangelical? It's a little bit different. Evangelicals meet the same born-again criteria, But they also say saying their faith is very important in their life today, believing they have a personal responsibility to share their religious beliefs about Christ with non-Christians, believing that Satan exists, believing that eternal salvation is possible only through grace, not works, believing that Jesus Christ lived a sinless life on earth, asserting that the Bible is accurate in all that it teaches, and 9, describing God as the all-knowing, all-powerful, perfect deity who created the universe and still rules it today. So that's the audience I'm talking about, okay? And that audience, I would ask, you want to win the assembly race? You want to win the state senate race? You want to win the congressional race? You want to win these judicial races? Then today, you think in terms of how do we activate these non-voting Christians. Here's 7 things. You know, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people mourn. So here are the 7 powerful ways to mobilize the Christian vote. Way number 1. The key to winning is to build that database. And how you do it? You do it through petitions and polls. Have you wondered why you see all these petitions and polls? Well, they do some good. I don't have time to tell you. They do some good. My petitions, other people's petitions do good. But they build data. And they define what people think. And so the progressives, that's what they do. They build their database. AB 2943, I got 15,000 people off Facebook. And some of those were in targeted areas. There's one congressional race. I got this call, and the candidate said, Craig, I'm running for Congress. And it's an impossible race. And you know, Craig, I know it's only like 5 weeks to the election, and I don't have much money, but what can you do? Well, I said, nobody knows who you are. You don't even live in the congressional district. Millions of dollars are going for the other people. You may know this race was with Kim and Sean Nelson and Robert Huff. Those were the key 3 Republicans running, and then there were 2 very aggressive Democrats. So what we did is we took about $80,000, which is nothing compared to the others. And this candidate, who's unknown, was unorganized, came in 3rd. He almost came in 2nd. The Democrat had a few thousand more votes than he did. If we had more time, he would have been number 2. If we had even more time and money, he would have been number 1. What did he do? The first thing we did is geofencing. You can do this here. Geofencing, basically we found 53 evangelical churches that were in his district. And we took everybody who was at that church on a Sunday for the last 6 weeks. And what we did is we geofenced and pulled up their cell phone data. And we sent them a video of Greg Laurie, of Brad Dacus, and other Christian leaders about the candidate. We also took the Harvest Crusade, and we took the Franklin Graham Crusade in Pasadena, and found the people that were in that congressional district that went to those 2 crusades. 94,000 names we identified. What did we do with them? We got them to sign AB 2943, and we collected the database. They didn't have door knockers like they should have. They had a small group of people in a room who called these people and said, our candidate Phil, he's going to fight for you to stop this type of bill. And he switched these votes, and he motivated these votes because these people wanted to stop the ban the Bible bill. So, with that type of campaign, he was able to activate the Christians. And it was under the radar of everyone. and was for a lot less. And this is similar to what Donald Trump did with the evangelicals in those key swing states. Second, church activation. Every church, you go to a church, you should have a salt and light group that brings in speakers and works with the pastor. 3, voter registration. Donald Trump got more evangelical votes than any presidential candidate ever. More evangelical votes than Jimmy Carter, more evangelical votes than Ronald Reagan, more evangelical votes than George Bush. A lot more than Mitt Romney. 81%. Guys, get this. 81% of the evangelical voters voted for Donald Trump. You go to any church and you start registering those voters, you can count on 81% of them voting the way you want them to vote. You try that going to Walmart. No way. You try that at a church, you're going to transform the registration and the voting patterns of your geographic area. So the voter registration, how does it do it? The best is when the pastor's on board and the pastor is passing out saying, how many of you haven't yet registered to vote? Good, let me pass out this registration form. That's the best way. Second best way is an election form. And I'll talk about that. That's where I go to the church. And at my church service, I'm the one who asks for people to register to vote. And the third one is salt and light groups, or you as an individual can have a little table at a church, and almost every church will say yes to that, to be able to sign people up. You won't get as many as the other two, but you can do it. Number 4, the awesome power of voter guides. Now, you've got your own voter guide here, and that's awesome. What we have is a voter guide that is compliant with the churches to send out without worrying about the Johnson Amendment in the IRS. And so we have found that 72% of the evangelicals and born-again Christians look at the voter guides. And we distribute it at church. We email it to the church list. We have a digital and hard copy of it. And also, evangelicals go to the website at the electionform.org. It's an evangelical website I have that they can take their cell phone in. Don't tell anybody with the election process I'm saying this. Take your cell phone in, go to the election form, and they see all the recommendations for the candidates. And they simply go straight down using their cell phone, and they know how to vote. We have it from Northern California to San Diego. We have a 5-star rating for all the races, including the judges. We're the only ones in the U.S. who rates the judges. And we have a separate site called judgevoterguide.com for that. This last primary, we won over 70% of the judicial races. For the first time, we're really pushing strict constructionists and defeating the well-financed, progressive judicial activists. We want to get 1 million people, 1 million evangelical born-again Christians to go to election form to see how to vote their values. Then there's the church election form. That's where myself and some of my staff will go to a church. Here's Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. We'll go to a church. You give me 20 to 25 churches in any assembly district, and that district can be a 10, 12% Democratic edge, we will win the election. We will activate enough people. Let me give you an example of Calvary Chapel, Montebello. That is 95% Hispanic church. I spoke there in June to close to 2,000 people who are low propensity voters. A lot of people not registered. We got them registered and we got them out to vote. And they voted their values. I had people coming up to me crying. I never heard this before. I never knew that if I vote for this Democrat, this progressive, that I'm voting for abortion. I'm voting against religious liberty. I'm voting for Planned Parenthood. I'm voting against Israel. I'm not voting my values. And in tears, I've done this all my life because the union told me to. I've done this because I've grown up as a Democrat. I've done this because my husband told me to. I can't do that. It's a huge game changer with people realizing they have to vote their values. So what happens? You know churches in this area. It's almost too late, but it's not too late to set up an election form at a church. We have one we are doing in Redlands, but we need to have 25 of these. And if you want to change to the congressional race, you want Sean to win the congressional race? Give me 50 churches and implement some of this stuff about the geofencing, and you'll have him win the election, and they won't know what hit him. So in these election forms, I talk about Christian worldview, Christians in voting, talk about the key issues, and then a call to action of what Christians should do. Now, I'm just going to show you, and we're almost done. I want to just show you how we do this. So I talk about what a Christian worldview is. I talk about the history of the church and how the church is the one that fights for justice and fights for compassion, and how throughout U.S. history, the foundation has been the church. And then I talk about the importance of voting and how to vote. And then I say, okay, what's the most important issue to you? Is it marriage? Is it abortion? Is it the war on terror? Is it the economy? Is it Israel? Christian civil liberties? And say, I talk about, I get to argue pro and con on the minimum wage. You raise the minimum wage here in California at $15, we've got 600,000 people who lost a job. That's what happened. I could argue that you've got to raise it to $15 because people need to make a living if they're going to work. And you can have a fight back and forth. But is that more important than saving the unborn? Is that more important than saving brothers and sisters in Christ who are being persecuted in India right now, in China right now, in Cuba right now? And they realize they got to make a priority of their beliefs over economic and other issues that may have driven them in the past. So we have them prioritized. Then I talk about the candidates. And I'm compliant with the Johnson Amendment because I don't give a recommendation. But I simply say, who's for regulating and outlawing homeschooling? Newsom is. John Cox is not. I talk about protection of Christian business owners. Gavin Newsom, no. John Cox, yes. Protection of Christian government employees. Gavin Newsom, no. John Cox, yes. Just recently, the state of California, the legislature, tried to put evangelical Christian colleges out of business like Biola and Zusa by saying they could not have a doctrine that is acceptable. That almost passed. It just barely defeated. But Newsom was for it. And Cox was against it. And how about AB 2943, the ban the Bible bill? Newsom is for it. Cox was against it. So we show them this. And then we talk about abortion. We talk about Psalm 139. These are some of the actual slides. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. You see, God loves you so much and He knows you before you were even born. And that's why God wants to see adoption, not taxpayers' money promoting abortion. And when they hear this, it resonates and they understand. And then we show them this. Should covered California pay for abortion? Newsom, yes. Cox, no. Does life begin at conception? Newsom, no. Cox, yes. Taxpayers' money for Planned Parenthood? Newsom, yes. Cox, no. Profile clinics promoting abortion? Yes, by Newsom. Cox, no. Parental consent for abortion? Newsom, no. John Cox, yes. And you know what? One of the worst things that most Democrats and independents agree with is you got to stop partial birth abortion. This is where up to the last day of a baby comes out, what the doctor will do instead of taking it out and killing it, which would be what? Murder, infanticide. They suck the brain out, and then they pull it out. Well, that's outlawed, and the Supreme Court said that's fine in most states. But here, Gavin Newsom is for partial birth abortion. John Cox is against it. So we go down that, and the church is transformed. Some churches I do that on a Sunday morning. Some church, and I do it a little modified, more respectful tone. Others, like Sunday night or a Wednesday night service. And if you've got a pastor, I'd be glad to talk to them, explain what I do. I need help to do that. Only you could be the army to open those doors. And incidentally, there is a Bible mobilization meeting for your pastor in Orange County or in San Diego. I will send you information if you sign that sheet. The pastor and his wife will get a free weekend at a beautiful hotel, all expenses paid, and they're going to hear from some of the great Christian leaders, and they're going to hear from some of the Christian politicians of why they need to mobilize their church, just like I've been telling you. Number 6, we need prayer by precinct, prayer for the candidate. And incidentally, I'm going to send this to you too. You might know somebody or yourself might want to do it. My wife is in charge of the John Cox prayer, governor's prayer team. Every Tuesday morning, she and thousands of people all over California get on the phone, learn about what's going on the Cox campaign, and prayer points, and then they pray. And then number 7, ultimately, to change California, to change the United States, we need revival. And so we're hoping and praying for that. So what to do? Let us help you. You guys can do it on your own. You can do these election forms yourself. You can do things at churches yourself. But if you need some help, we're here to help you. There's no charge for it. I go to these churches, no charge at all. This could be the number one thing you do in this election. I mentioned about these attacks by the government on our religious freedoms in my book. It's just one of the 15 chapters on the deep state, 15 surprising dangers you should know. I'm talking about the book on Fox and all over the United States. I encourage you to definitely read that chapter to get an understanding of why Christians need to get involved and why the deep state is part of the problem that's going on even right now. And I'll be glad to sign it. And sign up for my newsletter. Reality Alert is for evangelical born-again Christians. We have top church leadership who read it. We have Christians all over. We actually have over 100,000 subscribers to the newsletter, probably the largest such newsletter in the U.S. We have the Huey Report, which is secular. It stresses economics and economic freedom. And I went over. I apologize. But anyway, I hope that was helpful. If there's time for questions and answers, I'd be glad to do it. But let me just tell you this. This election, we should lose. The organization and the amount of money that we're up against is phenomenal. The progressives have gone ballistic. They believe it's their moral obligation. They made it into a religion of transformation to defeat the Republicans and to elect the Democrats. Whatever we do to stop that, we need to do. But if we don't activate the evangelical born-again believers, I'm worried about what's going to happen. And I do firmly believe that you can take a candidate that should have lost and make him win, just like Donald Trump.
We are past time, but it's been a great presentation. So you see, no one has gotten up and left. So that shows that everyone is interested. If there's any questions, I got to come down here in front and let's try to get through a few questions here before we adjourn.
Yeah. Question. GOTV. Regarding the turnout vote. Does that really apply now locally because we have so many people voting? By mail.
Yes. So GOTV does deal with the mail too. So that's where it has already started. And the Democrats are already getting out everything they need to know who to go to who has asked for a get out the vote ballot and trying to get people to get out the vote ballot if they don't already have it, so that they can get these people to mail in. So GOTV today is 2 phases. First phase, by mail. Second phase, door to door. Now, with that, let me just give you an example. I gave the illustration. You can come up with a big list in any assembly or congressional district, any city council race, any school board race, county race. You can come up with a list of evangelical Christians. I guarantee that over 50% of those evangelical Christians will not vote. But if you do phone calls and door knocks and do it wisely, you're going to move that group into voting because if you motivate them and help put the pressure on them to make an action, they will do so. So what do the Democrats do? They actually teach people how to do the GOTV and how to be able to do it for both types of things. I'll give you one example of what they do, and you can do this too. Great. So you think I can count on you to vote for Sean this coming November?
I don't get into that political stuff. I think that's the secular world. I'm much more into the kingdom of God.
So let me ask you this, Greg. If I could tell you that we could stop Planned Parenthood right now, because Sean will not allow tax money to be used for Planned Parenthood, would that be of interest to you?
Oh, definitely. Planned Parenthood, that's terrible.
So listen, you got to save a baby. And all you have to do is send that ballot in the mail. And if you'll do that, or would you prefer to go to the poll on Tuesday?
Well, I have that ballot there, and I don't know what I was going to do with it, but yeah, I mean, Sean Flynn's against Planned Parenthood?
Yeah.
Wow.
So listen, I'll tell you what I'll do. Greg, right after the election, the day after the election, I'm going to call you and see how it went, or I'm going to come to your door and see how it went. You see what they do? They say, I'm going to call or I'm going to go to your door and see how easy it was and how it went for you to actually vote. Greg's going to be thinking, I better get that ballot mailed in. I better get to the poll on Tuesday because I don't want to have to tell them I didn't vote. So they have found that they incrementally increase the voter turnout by doing these type of strategies. Now, we don't have time, but we should have done this last year. But they'll go up to the door and they'll say, hey, Greg, according to this, Greg, I got a feeling you might really be concerned about abortion. Is that true?
Yes.
Well, then that's why I want to talk to you about Sean and why it's so important for you to win the election. You see, they already have a profile. They could have said that about national defense. They could have said that about any different issue. For Christians, they could have found out, are they interested in stopping something like ban the Bible? And they're interested in religious liberty? And so you deal with somebody who's a low propensity voter on their level of what their number one concern is. That's what the progressive has. So the progressives know this. They know these are the Democrats that are going to vote. And these are the Democrats that usually don't vote. I'm not going to really spend time on the ones who are going to vote. I can count on them. The ones who may not be voting because they haven't voted 2 years ago or 4 years ago, those I'm going to go and make sure they vote. But then I've got this list of independents. And these are the ones who are the persuadable. This one is really concerned about their health insurance. And I got to scare them about Trump's health insurance policies. And they define who the persuadables are, and they talk about that issue. And they get that person out because of that one issue. So we're up against a well thought out, database marketing, get out the vote. And the Republicans don't have it. Conservatives don't have it. So what do we have? Well, we can try to do as much of this as we can. We have to. But we've got the church vote that they'll never have. We got the evangelicals where we're talking about millions of votes. We're talking about transforming this area and defeating the Democrats simply because of the church.
Janice.
So, I'm Jewish, and believe it or not, there's 5 people I know here in this room that are Jewish, and I know that the people of my tribe are sort of lockstep Democrats, and a lot of African American religious people are lockstep Democrats. And I know this is not the time for it, but I'm wondering if after the election, we could start, I don't know, even ministering to my folks about the conservative message.
Great question. So let me just say this, a couple of things. First of all, for those who are Jewish and Jewish conservatives, you know, Steve Frank is running for the chairman of the California Republican Party. And Steve Frank is Jewish. And Steve Frank understands the alliance between the Jews and the evangelical born-again Christians is essential. So he has spearheaded a thing called the Judeo-Christian Caucus. And the Judeo-Christian Caucus is uniting Jews and Christians, whether the Christians are evangelical, Catholic, whatever, to be a force independently, but specifically for the California Republican Party. You know, I've done the prayer meeting with the California Republican Party, where I've done the Sunday morning at their convention, and it's like a little thing they put in the bulletin and a few people show up. When I ran for Congress, and when I've helped other candidates run, the leadership of the California Republican Party do not want evangelical Christians running at all. They want them out. When I ran for Congress, I was initially promised $500,000. Then it went down to $50,000. And finally, the National Republican Committee sent me $5,000. That was like 2 weeks before the election. The whole thing is they have as a mindset that the Republican Party can't be too conservative, has to compromise in different issues, and cannot be associated with social issues. Now, anybody knows me, I'm a libertarian conservative, free market guy. I talk about free market economics, and that's my number one issue. But I also think it's consistent that you don't use taxpayers' money for abortion. And anybody should be able to agree with that in the Republican Party. And on abortion, I personally believe, in adoption over abortion. But the Republican Party doesn't like that. So we have the Judeo-Christian. The other thing is, I didn't say anything about Catholics. Many of you might be Catholics. Nobody has ever been able to get this type of election form in any Catholic church. And lots tried, but it's shut out.
We are way past time, and we can carry on this discussion a lot longer. We'll just say thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for what you're doing. And what you said is so important because so many Republicans, they'd be happy to have the church vote for them, but it's look down your nose at the Christian conservatives, and that's not going to work because our team, the economic, more secular, and the Christian conservatives are essential parts of our team if we're going to win. So thank you for what you're doing.